brace yourself, because the moment unfolding today is not another ordinary emotional shift, and it is certainly not another lesson designed to punish you. Something buried so deeply within your heart is preparing to split apart. And for the first time in a very long while, it is not happening because you made the wrong decision, trusted the wrong person, or failed to meet someone else's expectations. This fracture is arriving because the universe has reached a point where it will no longer allow you to carry a belief that has quietly shaped nearly every relationship you have ever experienced. Without realizing it, you may have spent years convincing yourself that love is a reward that must constantly be earned. Somewhere along the way, you began believing that acceptance only comes after endless sacrifice, relentless effort, flawless organization, complete selflessness, and impossible perfection. You may have unknowingly measured your value by how indispensable you could become, telling yourself that if you predicted everyone's needs before they spoke, if you gave more than anyone expected, if you remained endlessly dependable, then perhaps someone would finally decide you were worth keeping. Yet the painful truth hidden beneath that pattern has never been about your identity. It has been about believing your usefulness mattered more than your existence. Today, on August the 1st, Venus reaches an exact square with Black Moon Lilith, creating a precise 90-degree confrontation that refuses to tolerate illusion any longer. This is not a quiet influence that gently whispers for change. It is an unmistakable cosmic turning point that strips away every carefully constructed role you have been performing. The version of yourself that constantly smiles through disappointment, endlessly proves your worth, and hides exhaustion behind responsibility can no longer remain intact. The protective mask does not simply loosen under this energy, it breaks apart completely. Standing face to face with what remains may initially feel overwhelming, because you are finally meeting the part of yourself that existed before fear taught you to perform for affection. At the same time, what feels frightening may become the greatest release you have experienced in years, because freedom often arrives disguised as discomfort before it reveals itself as peace. If this week has brought an unusual sensation that you cannot easily explain, if you have awakened each morning with a strange pressure resting deep behind your breastbone, almost as though your chest has been holding a silent weight that refuses to disappear, do not dismiss it as random. Continue following this journey because there is a specific reason that your body has been responding this way, and that explanation is approaching. Before we arrive there, however, you need to recognize that none of today's events emerged without preparation. This moment has been quietly assembled behind the scenes for weeks. The cosmic patterns have been arranging themselves with extraordinary precision, while countless people move through their routines completely unaware that they had already entered the gravitational field of something much larger than themselves. What feels sudden today has actually been developing through layers of unseen momentum, like a storm gathering strength far beyond the horizon before anyone notices the sky beginning to darken. Listen carefully because this perspective changes everything. The month of July has never been an ordinary chapter. Perhaps you noticed yourself reacting more intensely than usual, feeling emotions ignite with surprising speed, or sensing an invisible tension stretching across conversations that once felt effortless. Relationships may have seemed unusually fragile, as though even small misunderstandings carried unexpected emotional weight. You were not imagining those experiences. You have been living inside an environment where invisible pressure continued increasing day after day. And now, the moment has finally arrived when that accumulated force can no longer remain contained. The sequence began quietly during the opening days of July, when Mars collided with Uranus in a volatile encounter that sent powerful waves through communication, connection, and the exchange of ideas. Discussions that normally would have remained calm suddenly became sharp. Words escaped before they could be softened. Inspiration appeared brilliant one moment, only to become unstable and unpredictable the next. Soon afterward, Neptune turned retrograde, bringing with it a different kind of uncertainty. This was never the kind of fog visible to your eyes. Instead, it settled within your inner world, gradually blurring the line between authentic truth and the comforting stories you had repeated to yourself, simply to endure difficult circumstances. As that uncertainty continued to spread, another important transition arrived. On July 9th, Venus entered Virgo, and the emotional landscape shifted in ways many people failed to recognize. The principles guiding love, affection, and personal value quietly transformed. Instead of measuring relationships through emotional expression alone, the focus drifted toward usefulness, responsibility, and practical contribution. Without consciously choosing it, you may have begun evaluating your worth by asking what you could accomplish for someone else, rather than appreciating the simple fact that your presence already carried value. Love slowly became associated with productivity instead of authenticity, and devotion became confused with constant performance. Then, only 3 days ago, on July 29th, the pressure intensified dramatically as 3 significant astrological events unfolded together. Venus formed a square with Mars, introducing raw friction into close relationships and exposing conflicts that had remained beneath the surface. At the very same time, the Sun united with Jupiter in Leo, magnifying hopes, desires, expectations, and emotional intensity until they became almost impossible to ignore. Simultaneously, the full moon in Aquarius illuminated every relationship through a cool, objective perspective, revealing where your energy had been endlessly flowing toward people who offered little in return. That lunar illumination created distance where attachment once clouded judgment. It offered clarity that may have felt uncomfortable because it exposed truths you had not been ready to acknowledge. Now, while that realization remains vivid inside your awareness, today's exact square between Venus and Black Moon Lilith does not arrive as a gentle invitation to reflect. It arrives like an explosion that releases everything suppressed beneath the surface. Every unresolved emotion, every hidden resentment, every silent compromise, and every forgotten truth has reached the point where remaining buried is no longer possible. Those who recognize the deeper meaning behind this cosmic alignment will understand how to move with its transformative current. Those who ignore it may suddenly feel as though the familiar structure of their lives has changed without warning, unable to understand why everything appears different overnight. And now we return to that mysterious sensation inside your chest. Think again about that persistent heaviness, the unusual tightness resting at the center of your body that seemed impossible to explain. This is where the experience becomes deeply personal. What you have been carrying is not simply ordinary anxiety. It is not merely workplace pressure or emotional strain caused by a disagreement. It reflects something much deeper, something that exists beyond the surface of everyday psychology. At the level of your soul, anticipation has already begun long before your conscious mind recognized it. Your body sensed this approaching transformation days ago, perhaps even longer, preparing itself for an emotional impact that your awareness had not yet fully understood. That physical response is your energetic field instinctively strengthening itself before a profound shift arrives. Few people realize this about a Venus and Black Moon Lilith square. Its influence does not remain confined to thoughts or feelings alone. It reaches directly into the body itself, ensuring that transformation is experienced not only through emotion, but through your entire being, and that realization leads directly into what happens next. There is a reason this alignment reaches far beyond emotions alone. Venus has always described the ways you experience affection, pleasure, comfort, intimacy, and the feeling of being genuinely connected to another person. Yet when Venus is struck by Black Moon Lilith through an exact square, the influence travels directly into your nervous system, creating a reaction that is impossible to ignore. This particular angle does not simply awaken feelings. It sends a powerful energetic surge throughout the entire body, forcing you to recognize what your mind has spent months, or perhaps years, trying to rationalize away. Long before your thoughts are willing to acknowledge the truth, your body begins refusing to carry the weight of situations it has silently tolerated. Patterns that once seemed manageable suddenly become unbearable. Relationships that required endless compromise begin to feel physically exhausting. The invisible burden you have carried without complaint starts pressing against every part of your being until it can no longer remain contained. If you have noticed that persistent tightness deep within your chest, that strange sensation of pressure that appears without a logical explanation, understand that it is not appearing by accident. It is the imprisoned part of your spirit, pushing relentlessly against walls that were never meant to contain it forever. That hidden part of you has reached its limit, and under today's celestial influence, it refuses to remain silent any longer. What finally emerges may initially unsettle you, because liberation rarely arrives in a comfortable form. Yet the release itself has been preparing beneath the surface for far longer than you realize. At the center of this entire astrological event lies a truth so simple that many people spend years avoiding it. Beneath every relationship, every sacrifice, every exhausting effort to keep peace, every moment you smiled while quietly carrying responsibilities that no one else seemed willing to notice, there exists a single desire that has remained carefully hidden. Perhaps you have never spoken it aloud because it felt too vulnerable. Perhaps you have buried it so deeply that even you stopped recognizing its presence. Yet it has quietly influenced countless choices throughout your life. More than anything, you long to discover whether love could exist even if you contributed absolutely nothing for a moment. You want to know whether your existence alone is enough. Not because you solved another problem, remembered every important detail, managed every emotional crisis, held an entire family together, or constantly ensured everyone else remained comfortable. You want the certainty that if you stopped performing every role expected of you, if you allowed yourself to appear disorganized, exhausted, imperfect, inconvenient, or emotionally overwhelmed, someone would still remain beside you. You want to believe that another person could choose you because of who you are, rather than because of everything you accomplish. That longing has remained hidden beneath layers of responsibility for far too long, but today's alignment refuses to allow it to remain concealed. Black Moon Lilith never introduces truth gently. Her influence is never subtle, and she has little interest in protecting carefully maintained illusions. She exposes what has been buried with unmistakable intensity. As her energy collides with Venus, while Venus moves through Virgo, a sign deeply connected with service, precision, usefulness, and the relentless pursuit of improvement, every emotional structure supported only by constant effort begins to lose stability. What feels as though your life is falling apart is not necessarily destruction. It is transformation, wearing the appearance of chaos. The experience can feel frightening, precisely because it removes the identity you have depended upon for so long. Yet beneath that discomfort waits the opportunity to meet yourself without conditions for perhaps the very first time. If your birth chart carries strong Virgo influence, whether through your sun, moon, rising, or significant Virgo placements, today's message speaks directly into your experience. The process may sting before it begins healing because Virgo has often expressed love through unwavering dedication rather than emotional demands. You may have built your relationships by anticipating needs before anyone voiced them, quietly organizing confusion, repairing problems before others noticed they existed, maintaining routines, protecting stability, and carrying responsibilities that held entire relationships together without asking for recognition. Over time, however, something subtle may have happened. The devotion you offered gradually stopped being appreciated and instead became expected. The countless invisible tasks you completed simply became part of the background, so ordinary that others forgot they were receiving extraordinary care every single day. You continued giving because, somewhere deep inside, a quiet fear convinced you that usefulness guaranteed belonging. You believed that if your service disappeared, perhaps affection would disappear with it. Today, Black Moon Lilith challenges that belief at its very foundation. The exact square strips away comforting illusions and reveals how exhausting it has become to chase perfection that was never designed to reward you. There is no finish line waiting at the end of endless self-sacrifice. No amount of flawless performance can create genuine appreciation in someone unwilling to value your presence apart from your contributions. This realization becomes Virgo's defining lesson under today's sky. The invitation is not to become more efficient or more generous. It is to experiment with doing less. Allow ordinary responsibilities to remain unfinished for a while. Resist the immediate urge to solve every problem before someone asks. Leave the dishes exactly where they are. Refrain from sending the extra message meant to maintain emotional balance. Observe what unfolds when you stop controlling every detail and allow silence to exist where constant effort once filled the space. The discomfort may feel almost unbearable because stillness asks you to confront the possibility that your value has never depended upon endless productivity. Yet if you remain present through that discomfort today, you may witness a revelation capable of reshaping every future relationship you create. For those carrying Sagittarius energy, the experience follows a different path, while leading toward an equally profound realization. Black Moon. Lilith is currently traveling through your sign, magnifying every truth you have postponed confronting. Throughout your life, you may have celebrated independence as your highest principle, convincing yourself that unrestricted movement, personal freedom, and limitless possibility represented your deepest needs. You may have viewed routines, commitments, or the ordinary responsibilities required to build a shared life as invisible walls threatening to confine your spirit. Whenever a relationship requested consistency, reliability, or participation in everyday responsibilities, it may have felt as though someone was attempting to reduce your limitless nature into something smaller. Under today's exact square between Venus and Black Moon Lilith, those long-held beliefs are brought directly into the light, inviting you to recognize what has truly been driving your desire to keep moving before the next layer of this story fully reveals itself. For much of your life, that explanation has probably felt completely believable. The flame that defines Sagittarius naturally reaches toward distant horizons, endless discovery, deeper wisdom, and experiences that promise constant expansion. There is nothing false about that part of your nature. Your spirit genuinely longs for movement, exploration, and the feeling that life always contains another mountain waiting beyond the one you have already climbed. Yet today's exact square between Venus and Black Moon, Lilith quietly asks a far more uncomfortable question. How much of the freedom you celebrate is authentic liberation? And how much of it has slowly become an elegant strategy for avoiding the vulnerability that genuine closeness demands? Venus, traveling through Virgo, has no interest in beautiful theories about love or inspiring speeches about limitless possibility. Her attention is fixed entirely on what exists in reality. She examines the life you have actually created, rather than the one you imagine. She observes every promise that was spoken and compares it with every promise that was fulfilled. She notices each moment you sincerely intended to remain present, but ultimately disappeared into another obligation, another opportunity, another pursuit, or another version of today. She measures the distance between your magnificent vision of love and the quiet, repetitive discipline required to stand beside another human being through ordinary days that rarely feel exciting. Those daily moments offer little excitement for a restless heart that constantly seeks the next horizon, yet they are precisely where lasting intimacy is built. Under today's celestial alignment, the truth hidden beneath Sagittarius energy can no longer remain protected. The deepest longing you have defended against for years finally rises into full awareness. Beneath your pursuit of endless freedom lives a quiet desire for permanence. You want a place where your journey ends each evening. You want someone whose presence feels like home instead of another destination to pass through. You long for the stability you have spent so much of your life believing would somehow diminish your spirit. The irony is not that you reject commitment because you dislike it. The deeper truth is that genuine commitment asks something much more frightening. It asks you to become completely visible, not as the inspiring storyteller, the fearless explorer, or the endlessly optimistic dreamer who always seems larger than life. It asks you to reveal the quieter version of yourself, the one who worries about being ordinary, the one who sometimes doubts, sometimes feels lost, and sometimes carries questions instead of answers. That hidden self has remained carefully protected behind movement and possibility for longer than you realize. Today, Black Moon Lilith forces that hidden door wide open. Once it opens, the response you choose will echo far beyond this single day because it determines whether your next chapter is built upon continued escape or authentic belonging. Then the energy shifts toward Pisces, and the emotional current becomes even more profound. Pisces stands at the meeting point of this entire celestial pattern, suspended between Virgo's unwavering demand for practical honesty and Sagittarius's insistence upon fearless truth, leaving almost no room for illusion to survive. If you carry strong Pisces influence, you already understand what it means to love without boundaries. You know how easily your identity can dissolve into someone else's needs until the line separating your emotions from theirs becomes almost impossible to recognize. Throughout your life, you may have described this as devotion. You may have believed it represented unconditional love, spiritual compassion, or a sacred emotional connection that transcended ordinary relationships. Yet today's exact square between Venus and Black Moon Lilith presents a radically different interpretation. It asks whether what you have called unconditional love has quietly become unconditional abandonment of yourself. This realization is not comfortable because it corners Pisces in a place where endless empathy can no longer provide an escape. Romantic idealism loses its protective power. Spiritual explanations no longer soften painful reality. Venus in Virgo insists that you examine your relationships through tangible evidence rather than hopeful imagination. She asks you to notice where financial responsibility has become uneven. She points toward emotional labor that consistently travels in only one direction. She illuminates every excuse that has been transformed into a spiritual lesson, simply because accepting the truth felt too painful. At the same time, Black Moon Lilith moving through Sagittarius ignites every unresolved wound you have continued forgiving without limit. This is not a gentle spark encouraging reflection. It is an ancient fire that burns through accumulated disappointment, exposing every moment your generosity was accepted without appreciation. Every occasion, your compassion became an opportunity for someone else to take more than they were willing to give. And every instance, your inability to say no quietly invited others to continue crossing boundaries that should never have been ignored. Beneath all of that patience, another longing has been waiting to emerge. The secret desire Pisces has hidden is not cruelty, selfishness, or indifference. It is the simple desire to place your own well-being first, without drowning in guilt afterward. It is the longing to look directly at someone whose presence has steadily depleted your energy, and finally recognize that endless endurance is not the same as unconditional love. It is the realization that continuously accepting disrespect does not represent spiritual evolution. It represents sacrificing yourself in the hope that someone else might eventually change. That understanding has been building quietly inside you for much longer than your conscious mind recognizes. Today, it finally rises to the surface with undeniable force. When it does, resist the temptation to bury it once again. That voice exists because your soul has reached the point where silence is no longer compatible with healing. What makes today's alignment even more extraordinary is that its influence extends far beyond the experiences of a single date. The decisions, realizations, and emotional breakthroughs emerging on August 1st carry significance because they unfold beneath the growing shadow of the approaching eclipse season. On August 12th, a total solar eclipse arrives in Leo, marking one of the most powerful moments of renewal and redirection within the entire year. Eclipses never function as ordinary astrological events. They reshape personal timelines. They accelerate destiny in ways that often feel impossible to predict. They remove structures whose purpose has already been fulfilled, while simultaneously creating space for entirely new beginnings to emerge. The exact square between Venus and Black Moon, Lilith, occurring today, unfolds within the unmistakable gravitational influence of that approaching eclipse. As a result, everything revealed now carries lasting importance. The hidden truths that surface today, the difficult conversations that can no longer be postponed, the desires you finally acknowledge, and the relationship patterns that begin breaking apart are not passing emotional disturbances destined to disappear today. They represent pivotal moments woven into a much larger sequence the universe has already set into motion. The cracks appearing in your relationships today are not invitations to cover the damage and pretend nothing happened. They are invitations to witness reality exactly as it is. A carefully orchestrated chain of transformation has already begun, and today marks the first movement in that unfolding process. The exact square opens the door, and the total solar eclipse in Leo will carry that transformation to its inevitable completion. If today leaves you with the unmistakable feeling that something deep inside your understanding of love, self-worth, or the relationship surrounding you has quietly but permanently shifted, do not dismiss that experience as passing emotion. Trust what you are sensing. What is unfolding is not an unpredictable mood or an emotional overreaction. It is an internal realignment that has been developing beneath your awareness for weeks, finally reaching the point where it can no longer remain hidden. For a moment, set aside the planetary movements. Set aside Venus, Black Moon, Lilith, the exact square, the degrees, the charts, and every technical detail of astrology. Beneath all of those symbolic layers rests one question that is astonishingly simple, yet capable of changing the direction of an entire life. It is a question so honest that many people spend years avoiding it because they instinctively understand how powerful the answer will be. Imagine removing every role you have spent years perfecting. Imagine no longer being the one who fixes every problem before anyone notices it exists. Imagine stepping away from being the planner, the emotional caretaker, the dependable organizer, the patient counselor, the encouraging voice that always reaches out first, or the steady foundation everyone quietly leans upon. If every performance ended today, who would still remain beside you? Who would continue choosing your presence when there was nothing left to gain from your effort? Who would continue seeing you when the polished version disappeared and only the authentic, imperfect, occasionally overwhelmed, beautifully human version remained? That is the deeper invitation hidden within August 1st, 2026. It is not merely asking who appreciates your contribution. It is asking who truly loves your existence. For some watching this, the answer may arrive with unexpected comfort. You may discover that your greatest fears were built upon assumptions rather than reality. You may recognize that the people who genuinely care about you never required endless proof, constant productivity, or flawless devotion. The exhausting performance existed largely because you believed it was necessary, not because authentic love demanded it. Realizing that truth may feel like setting down a weight you forgot you had been carrying for years. Yet for others, the answer may emerge through an entirely different experience. There may be a silence that follows this question, and that silence will speak with extraordinary clarity. Black Moon Lilith has little interest in allowing uncomfortable truths to disappear once they have entered your awareness. After you hear what that silence reveals, pretending you never noticed becomes almost impossible. Even so, today's energy is not asking you to react recklessly. It is not inviting you to dismantle your entire life in a single emotional moment. As powerful as today's revelations may feel, permanent decisions should never be rushed under temporary emotional intensity. Allow yourself to experience everything that rises without immediately turning every feeling into action. If anger surfaces, welcome it without allowing it to control you. If grief appears, acknowledge it without trying to silence it. If years of emotional exhaustion finally settle into your body, let yourself recognize how long you have been carrying more than anyone should have been expected to carry. Give those emotions room to exist, but resist confusing immediate reaction with lasting wisdom. The influence of Black Moon Lilith is undeniably intense. It possesses extraordinary transformative power, and that power is essential for exposing truth. Yet truth revealed in a single moment still deserves thoughtful integration before it becomes irreversible action. The insights arriving today are invitations to observe before they become invitations to decide. Record what you notice. Write down every realization that surprises you. Capture the conversations that suddenly alter your perspective. Pay close attention to your physical responses as much as your emotional ones. Notice where your body contracts. Notice where tension unexpectedly dissolves. Observe what situations suddenly feel impossible to tolerate, and what experiences unexpectedly create peace. None of these responses are random. They are valuable messages emerging from the profound dialogue taking place between your body, your emotions, and your soul. Treat them with curiosity instead of panic. They are information guiding your next steps, not emergencies demanding immediate solutions. Remember that today's exact square between Venus and Black Moon Lilith begins a process rather than completing one. It reveals the wound that has quietly influenced your relationships, your identity, and your understanding of love. The eclipses arriving during August will continue unfolding the deeper transformation, gradually illuminating the path toward healing and renewal. Yet that healing cannot fully begin until you become completely honest about everything today's alignment has uncovered. Healing built upon denial never lasts. Healing built upon truth changes everything. Beneath every planetary alignment, every symbolic archetype, every geometric pattern crossing the heavens, another truth has always existed, and perhaps it is the most important realization of all. You were never meant to spend your life constantly proving that you deserve to be loved. Genuine love has never required endless qualifications. It does not ask you to submit a record of achievements before allowing you to belong. It does not expect continuous demonstrations of your usefulness before granting affection. It does not require you to silence your own needs, reduce your authentic nature, hide your imperfections, or dedicate every ounce of your energy to serving others simply to justify your place in someone's world. The version of yourself that has been surviving on emotional exhaustion has spent countless days anticipating everyone else's needs while quietly postponing your own. That same version has lived with the persistent fear that if usefulness disappeared, visibility would disappear with it. Today marks the beginning of the end for that belief. Freedom may not arrive gently. It may not feel comfortable, familiar, or predictable. Black Moon Lilith rarely transforms anyone through comfort. Instead, she removes the illusion that comfort and truth are always the same thing. Yet beyond today's intensity waits something infinitely more valuable than temporary certainty. When this emotional storm settles, when the first quiet morning of August arrives and the noise inside your heart begins to soften, you will possess a clarity that did not exist before today. You will understand which relationships recognize your authentic self rather than your performance. More importantly, you will begin recognizing something about yourself that has always been true, even when you forgot it. The person beneath every role, every responsibility, every sacrifice, and every expectation has never needed to earn the right to exist. That person has always been enough. August 1st changes the direction of this journey. Allow it to do exactly what it came here to accomplish. Before we close, thank you for spending this time here and sharing this journey. If today's message resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring these deeper astrological insights together, consider subscribing so you do not miss future videos. Your support truly makes this work possible. If this message reflected something you are currently experiencing, I would love to hear your thoughts and personal reflections in the comments. Until our next conversation, take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.